A lot has changed with Davante Adams now on the Jets. You've got Amari Cooper on the Bills now. Our ultimate rankings are going to be very interesting this week. So if you enjoy the ultimate rankings, make sure you drop a like. Make sure you're subscribed. All of your rankings for the week in one place. Let's get to running back rankings here first. And let's start in the S tier with Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Kyren Williams. All three of these guys are going to be S tier probably as long as they are playing this season. They've all been very good. And when you're looking at these matchups, Kyren playing the Raiders is a Vegas line of 43.5 total points. Saquon playing the Giants is a line of 43 points, so those are a little bit lower scoring games, with Henry being a little bit in the higher scoring game. But none of the defenses that they're playing here, none of these top three guys have really tough matchups this week. And so because of that, all three of them are kind of just neutral. And again, all of them are guys we're going to start every week. So these guys are going to be the S tier for running backs.
Yeah, and then the A tier, we're going to have Kenneth Walker at the top. As long as he is on the field and healthy, he's going to be in this range because he's just so dominant. He's so much fun to watch when he is healthy and playing. You got Alvin Kamara, who's got a better matchup against the Broncos. He's had a tough couple of weeks, obviously, with the Derek Carr injury, Spencer Rattler coming in. He's had a couple of dud weeks. We're not expecting him to be super affected. Rest of season, obviously, still ranking him here. Bijan has a great week last week against the Carolina Panthers. Everybody give him a hand. Woo! Woo! All right. He is not dead. We got to see him continue to do this to get back into the S tier against a better team in the Seattle Seahawks. Jonathan Taylor, we will have higher in future matchups. He has a really friendly matchup, honestly, against the Miami Dolphins. They'll probably run the ball pretty consistently since AR can't throw it, but he is coming back off of an injury, so it just depends on what his workload is, if they're going to ease him in. Honestly, I mean, if he ends up being a game time decision and doesn't play, we're going to have to move Trey Sermon up our rankings at the end of the week as well. But JT, expecting to have a solid week, but maybe not like the elite ceiling that he usually has coming off that angle.
All right, let's go to the beats here. Joe Mixon's going to be at the top here, playing the Packers in a game that should be pretty high scoring. The Packers have been good against the run, but not great this year, and Joe Mixon has been a beast when he's on the field. J.K. Dobbins is the guy that gets elevated into the beats here this week because he's playing the Cardinals, and the Cardinals have not been super great against the run. J.K. Dobbins, when he's been on the field, has just been fairly productive this year, and a game where the Vegas line's 43.5, we'll expect him to have some touchdown upside. Devon Achane's going to be moved up to where he's normally not here without Tua, but he plays the Colts. And the Colts are bad, like legit bad. So
horrible.
You have to move Achane up. Breece Hall moves down a little bit here because he's playing the Steelers. It's a tough matchup for Breece Hall. The Steelers have given up the 7th least amount of points to running backs this year. And obviously you have Davante Adams going over to the New York Jets. It's going to take away a little bit of red zone upside for Breece Hall. So we're going to have to adjust and kind of see how that sorts out with Davante Adams in that new offense. David Montgomery, he and Jahmyr Gibbs are both in this tier. We have Montgomery 2 spots ahead of Gibbs because he has been consistently outscoring Jahmyr Gibbs in fantasy football, but they both have pretty tough matchups. The Vikings have been the second best team against fantasy running backs this year, so their defense has been very good. That said, it projects to be a pretty high-scoring game. The Vegas line is set at 49 total points for that game, and so both of these guys do still have touchdown upside. It's going to depend on which one gets the touchdown, I think. Tony Pollard playing the Bills. Again, Tony Pollard is going to get elevated here because the Bills are a good matchup. The Bills have allowed the second most points to running backs this year, and now you don't have Tyjae Spears. Tony Pollard should get every valuable touch in that offense. James Cook and Josh Jacobs, both of these guys are playing a little bit tougher matchups this week. Josh Jacobs against the Texans and James Cook against the Titans, both pretty good run defenses against fantasy football running backs, and Josh Jacobs projects to be the higher scoring game, but he still hasn't really been scoring a lot of touchdowns, so again, you're going to be counting on some touchdowns between both James Cook, if James Cook does play, this is assuming he does, and then Josh Jacobs playing the Texans this week.
Yeah, and then at the top of the C tier, we have Jordan Mason. The reason he's a little bit lower than usual is because he's playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have one of the better defensive lines in the league. It could be a tough matchup for him, not to mention he's coming off of that AC joint sprain where they did say that he was going to be okay with his shoulder injury, but we'll see if they limit his work. And Isaac Grendo honestly looked pretty explosive, pretty good. He may get his opportunity until CMC comes back. I do want to touch on B-Rob and Eckler, both in this tier. This is kind of accounting for the risk of B-Rob heading into Week 7 against Carolina. Obviously, it's one of the more friendly matchups that you're going to see of the entire week. Whatever running back is the starting number one running back, you're going to start of Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson. Honestly, you may even want to consider flexing Austin Eckler if you're struggling at running back, even if B-Rob does play, just because it is such a good matchup for Washington this week against Carolina. So both of these guys are going to be great options. B-Rob, you could rank him higher if he was, guaranteed to come back fully healthy. We just don't really know yet with that lower leg injury. And then Najee Harris makes his way up our rankings just a little bit. He is playing the Jets, tougher matchup, but he had a really good game, one of his better games that we've seen in the last couple of years last week, and hopefully he can continue that. Obviously not expecting 7.3 yards per carry again, but while everyone else in that offense is struggling, Russell Wilson now is going to be starting, so that's been confirmed for the Steelers. you're looking at that situation overall, and it's like, hey, maybe that could help Najee Harris produce a little more. So
let's go to the D's tier now. Let's talk about Chase Brown. Chase Brown playing the Browns this week, which is kind of ironic from a name perspective, but Chase Brown has been consistently outscoring Zach Moss, so we're going to be putting him higher than Zach Moss. Alexander Madison has the best matchup of anybody in this tier. The Rams have given up the 6th most points to running back this year, but Madison isn't a bad offense that just lost Devontae Adams, so we'll kind of see there. You've got Kareem Hunt, Devin Singletary, Bucky Irving is the guy in this tier with the worst matchup. He is playing the Baltimore Ravens, who have given up the 5th least amount of points to running backs this year in fantasy football, but Bucky is going to be ranked higher than Rachaad White because he is consistently outscoring Rachaad White, and honestly, that running back room now with the addition of Sean Tucker, and by the way, confirmed by Todd Bowles that could be a 3-headed monster, literally his words, that running back room just got extremely hard to gauge in fantasy football. And Tyron Tracy is going to be, right now, we technically have him below Devin Singletary, but we have them in the same tier because we don't really know. We think that it might be a 50-50 split between these two guys. Tyron Tracy could end up being the receiving back, and he could have more week-to-week upside. But it's going to be interesting to see how the Giants handle their running back rotation this week because I think next week we're definitely going to have to adjust for our rankings.
Yep. And then the F tier, we're going to have, again, a bunch of guys that, given some injury or whatever, maybe they could be productive guys like Tank Bigsby, Ray Davis, Ty Chandler, even if Aaron Jones is still banged up and can't come back fully healthy. Ty Chandler, you want to move up for sure. Rachaad White, again, just depends on how he's utilized in that offense. Javonte Williams, really the only technical running back one here, but the reason he's so low is because he, along with the rest of that offense, kind of sucks, and his ceiling is just awful, and he's not getting consistent receiving work. Yes, he's had a couple of weeks where he's shown flashes. Cannot depend on that on a weekly basis from Javonte. You're only starting him if you absolutely have to. And then the G tier here, just going to be a short little G tier with Gibson, Moss, Braylon Allen, and Chubb. Chubb will probably continue to move up these rankings in the future as, Amari Cooper obviously just traded. We're expecting potentially that Cleveland becomes a lot more run heavy, which could benefit Nick Chubb down the line, but he's coming off of a devastating injury. It's going to be we're going to have to see him produce before we move him up.
All right, let's talk about wide receivers now, and let's start in the S tier. These are going to be guys that are going to be in the S tier pretty much the rest of the season, but like all 5 of these guys are guys that you're going to want to start every week. These are your cornerstones. These are the guys you drafted to be elite. All of these guys were first-round draft picks, except for Malik Neighbors, who if you drafted, you are a gigabrain because you drafted him in the 3rd, and he has a 38% target share right now. So all of these guys,
oh my gosh,
really freaking solid.
Holy crap!
Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah,
A tier at the top is going to be Drake London. You could honestly, at this point, you could consider him in the S tier as well. He has been so good the last couple of weeks. He and Kirk Cousins absolutely clicking on all cylinders. They look amazing, and we're feeling really good about that take right now. Other guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin will also be in this tier. Per usual, they both have really great upside. Chris Godwin goes off last week. It could be Mike Evans this week. Even when one goes off, the other one still has a pretty decent floor. Devontae Adams is the guy I want to highlight here. He is at the tail end of this A tier. We are going out guns a-blazing with Devontae Adams. First game with Aaron Rodgers. I think he's going to have a solid week. A lot of the reason is because Pittsburgh's run defense is better than their pass defense. Their corners are really struggling and pretty banged up. I think Devontae Adams is going to absolutely work them, and Aaron Rodgers is just going to be giddy to get him the ball immediately. So expect them to have a pretty good week. We're putting them at the end of this A tier.
All right, this is the tier you've all been waiting for. Let's go to the B tier. We'll start with DK. DK would have had a lot more points last week had he had that touchdown count, but it got called back. Man had 12 targets and only caught 3 of them. DK still projects to be a really good wide receiver this season. And then Amari Cooper playing the Tennessee Titans in his first week as a Buffalo Bill. And the over-under for that game is 42.5. And the Titans have allowed the 2nd least amount of points to fantasy wide receivers this year. That's significant, but it's not because you just saw Josh Downs and Michael Pittman both produce against the Tennessee Titans because they're that bad. So I think part of that is competition-based. Amari Cooper's going to be a high-end wide receiver, too, in his first week with the Bills, and you're starting him no matter what. Tyreek Hill's playing the Colts. Honestly, he gets a little bit of a bump without Tua, even though he hasn't really been producing like Tyreek Hill should. They play the Colts. Yeah, that's all you need to say. Diggs is going to be playing without Nico, so he projects really high playing the Packers in what should be a high-scoring game. Terry McLaurin is going to continue to be ranked up here. He's playing the Panthers this week, so a very good matchup. And honestly, the Vegas line for that one is really high, 52.5. So I expect some touchdown upside for him as well. He had 2 touchdowns last week. Debo playing the Chiefs is a tough matchup. The Chiefs have allowed the 6th least amount of points to wide receivers this year, but Debo with the upside, especially with Christian McCaffrey out, you're going to continue to see him produce, I think. Deontay Johnson playing the Commanders, again, high-scoring game in the Commanders. it's a pretty good matchup for him. Devonta Smith playing the Giants and then T. Higgins playing the Browns are both guys, wide receiver twos on their team. Both have been producing at a very high level, and so they're both really solid starting wide receiver options for your fantasy team.
You got 4 green lights for the Minnesota Vikings playing the Detroit Lions this week for those receivers. J-Jeff obviously going to be phenomenal this week. Jordan Addison we expect to have a nice week as well. One of the bigger reasons is because Aiden Hutchinson went down with a devastating leg injury last week, and I think that's really going to benefit the passing game for the Minnesota Vikings specifically and Sam Darnold. I think he's going to be slinging it back there because Aaron Jones is banged up. He may or may not come back. We don't really know. And I think Addison is going to be the main beneficiary from that and hopefully have some touchdown upside as well to boost his overall ceiling for this matchup. Cooper Kupp, we're going to rank in this tier as well, assuming that he comes back healthy. Again, that's up in the air. But if he plays, you're starting Cooper Kupp because there's no one else there. Garrett Wilson, you're seeing where Garrett Wilson is here. He's now in this C tier with all of these guys where he is going to have respectable upside. He may have some solid games, but his touchdown upside has been, significantly diminished because Davante Adams is now in that offense. So expect his production to come from a decent amount of volume where we expect him to maybe, run from the slot. So we'll really see there. Jameson Williams, again, has plenty of green lights against Minnesota. I think he has some touchdown upside, big playability for this game as well. Tank Dell, now the wide receiver 2 for CJ Stroud, coming off of a solid 18-point game. And Brandon Ayuk cannot freaking consistently produce. He's got another tough matchup against Kansas City this week. He needs to find a way to produce even in tough matchups. He's going to be ranked like this, if not lower, if he cannot have another good week.
Moving down to the D's tier here, let's go to Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's playing the Falcons this week. Neutral matchup for him and also projects to be a pretty high-scoring game, so he's going to be a solid option for your flexes this week. Jacoby Myers, I'd be looking at flexing Jacoby Myers multiple weeks now for the rest of the season. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 in Las Vegas. And I think he's somebody, if you have him on your team got a little bit of a depth boost because Jacoby Myers does project to get a lot of targets for the rest of the season. We'll see how he does in that wide receiver 1 role alongside Brock Bowers, who will also be getting a lot of targets. Wan'Dale Robinson continues to get targets, plays a pretty good matchup in the Eagles. The Eagles have given up the 6th most points to wide receivers this year. George Pickens, I don't feel like we need to justify this, but I feel like we need to justify it because people are very outrageous about this one. George Pickens is the wide receiver 42 on the season. We are continually ranking him higher than where he's finishing because we do know that he has upside. So you're welcome for being realistic about his upside.
And we gave him a little bit of a bump because Russ is playing
And Russ is
now.
coming back, so he's going to come up a little bit.
Yep.
And then the F tier, Michael Pittman playing the Dolphins. Pittman, could honestly be lower than this.
Yeah, he could be.
We will wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 is what he's going to be with Anthony Richardson. Really sucks. Mooney's been a little bit more hit or miss. He was missed last week. He was hit the 2 weeks before. So we'll kind of see. The Seahawks, it's supposed to be a high scoring game, but clearly they're going to throw the ball a lot in Atlanta. It makes Mooney at least flexible. Cortland Sutton, another touchdown last week. It really helped his scoring. Supposed to be a pretty low scoring game against the Saints, but the Saints haven't been great against wide receivers this year. And then Christian Kirk against the Patriots. That's another tougher matchup, but it's kind of average. The situation in Jacksonville continues to get worse, but Christian Kirk has still been somewhat productive compared to his first couple of weeks. So we're going to continue to consider flexing him in our fantasy football leagues.
Ladd has a solid matchup against the Arizona Cardinals this week. He'll be at the top of the G tier. The reason we don't have him higher is because I think we're really expecting J.K. Dobbins to have a bigger week than anyone else in that offense. And Ladd McConkey's a little bit banged up as well. So we'll see how that goes. He may have a solid game, but honestly, I'd probably count on the running backs in that room and a Greg Roman-led offense more than the receivers. Michael Wilson has a nice bump in a tougher matchup because we're expecting Marvin Harrison Jr. to not play coming off of that concussion. Jerry Jeudy, I want to highlight in this tier as well. Playing the Cincinnati Bugles, he is effectively the wide receiver 1 for Deshaun Watson. How much does that mean for the worst quarterback, not just this year, but legit over the last 2 decades? I don't really know how much that means until Jameis Winston starts playing and slinging it, but you do have to rank respectfully one of the lead wide receivers in an offense that has shown they still want to pass the ball, even if Deshaun is absolutely awful. He's gotten a decent amount of volume as well, so we'll see what he can do without Amari Cooper. Christian Watson coming off a nice touchdown game. He's got a nice, decent matchup against the Houston Texans. Maybe he can pull off another big play. We'll see what he's capable of doing. Tyler Lockett, same kind of thing as Christian Watson. They're both very touchdown dependent. Xavier Worthy as well. Kind of looking at these guys being very boom bust. If they get a touchdown, they were worth flexing. If not, they weren't, and it's kind of just a shot in the dark.
Moving down to the H tier here, we'll start with Josh Downs. Obviously, he's been on a tear recently, but with Anthony Richardson coming back, we don't expect that to continue, and the Dolphins have been pretty good against wide receivers this year in fantasy.
Like the best, actually.
Yeah. Xavier Legette playing the Commanders, good matchup for him. It's going to depend on touchdowns, I think, with Legette, but we'll see how he does this week. Rashid Shaheed continues to be kind of hit or miss, but he continues to get a lot of targets, and actually has produced in more games than he hasn't this year. And so it is a tough matchup, though, against the Broncos. The Broncos have been also very good. Calvin Ridley playing the Bills. Ridley has been almost irrelevant now, but he's just going to be borderline flexible. Romeo Doubs, Juju Smith-Schuster, Trey Tucker, and Quentin Johnston will round out this tier. All guys that, again, you're considering, if you have a lot of bye weeks or something like that, you would be considering flexing these guys. So let's jump over to tight ends now. Let's talk about these guys. So there are 4 guys you feel really comfortable starting the rest of the season. George Kittle, Brock Bowers, Travis Kelce, and Trey McBride. All of these guys have fairly decent matchups this week. Not super worried about any of these guys. All of them are, again, in a tight end landscape that's very bare right now. These are 4 guys you feel comfortable starting every week. So
yeah, and then the next tier, we've just got a bunch of dudes that may or may not do something. Evan Ingram, honestly, is the guy that I'm most comfortable with and confident in here. He just picked up right where he left off. He's getting a ridiculous amount of target volume there. I mean, honestly, he may finish as a wide receiver 1 there from a target volume perspective again, like he did last season. Sam Laporta, Kyle Pitts, guys that are boom bust. Honestly, Kyle Pitts more boom bust than Sam Laporta, who just straight up hasn't been producing. I am not more optimistic about Sam Laporta's outlook for the rest of the season because of his 52-yard touchdown. That was his only target and reception against the Dallas Cowboys that they absolutely shellacked, and they didn't need to use Sam Laporta. So David Njoku gets a real nice bump this week because I think he may be the main beneficiary from a fantasy perspective that really is productive potentially for the rest of the season. In Cleveland, if they transition to a run-heavy offense, David Njoku might be productive there as well, with Amari Cooper now being gone. Tucker Kraft going to keep being in this range as well, and then Dallas Goedert, this is assuming he comes back from a concussion. We don't really know. It seems like 50-50 at the moment. Even then, he's kind of a borderline flex option because A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are both back. Kincaid had a decent day on Monday night. We'll see what he can do against a Titans defense that is pretty stout.
And then wrapping it up here with the B and C tier, we got Freiermuth, who's playing the Jets. Tough matchup for him. Dalton Schultz, Hunter Henry, both of these guys, all 3 of these guys in the same tier. And you know, with Schultz and Henry, they have better matchups this week, but they've just been hit or miss this year. And so you're only streaming them if you have to. And same with these guys in this last year. Isaiah Likely, who is the starting tight end for the Ravens. You've got Cade Otton, Colby Parkinson, and Tyler Conklin. Again, all these guys, you're only streaming them with bye weeks or injuries or something like that if you need to. But those are going to be the tight ends for the week.
And then the S tier for your quarterbacks, we're going to start with pretty much all your rushing guys. Again, we're going to consistently do this. Get used to it if you haven't already. Jaden Daniels at the top, Lamar Jackson at number 2. Both of them have great matchups. Daniels going against Carolina, Lamar going against Tampa, who just let Spencer Rattler throw the ball all over the place, at least in the first 2.5 quarters of the game. So Lamar is probably going to have a good day. Josh Allen, we actually had lower than this by a spot or 2. Now with the Amari Cooper news, I think that his floor has been raised. And honestly, rest of the season, I think Josh Allen is going to be the quarterback 1 with Amari Cooper now there. Even with a tough matchup against Tennessee, I don't think it matters. Flacco was slinging it last week. Josh Allen is 10 times better. And now he has Amari Cooper. Again, let me reinforce. He has Amari Cooper. He's going to be throwing it all over the place like he hasn't been able to for the first 6 weeks of the season. Expect a big week from him and a big rest of the season for Josh Allen. Jalen Hurts, again, with his rushing upside, just a nice little floor. They're playing the Giants, kind of a revenge game for Saquon Barkley, so we'll see who ends up getting the majority of the production there, but you're starting all these guys every single week.
Dropping down to the A tier here, let's go Joe Burrow against the Cleveland Browns, who looked like Lamar Jackson last week, so there's that. Jordan Love against the Texans. Jordan Love has a pretty good matchup, and it's supposed to be a pretty high-scoring game. Baker Mayfield has an even better matchup against the Ravens, who have allowed the 3rd most points to quarterbacks this year, and Baker continues to sling it. He's a rest of season quarterback 1, it looks like. He looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Kyler playing the Chargers, tough matchup. Kyler's been hit or miss, so we'll kind of see there. Pat Mahomes and CJ Stroud, both really good real-life NFL quarterbacks, but in fantasy, they've been a little bit disappointing, honestly. And so while they're going to be solid starting quarterbacks for you, you do definitely want to have one of the guys above them on this list if you want to feel really good about your quarterback spot.
Yeah, now we're just going to continue on with a bunch of these pass-happy guys that have, decent floors, not crazy ceilings. Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold, Kirk Cousins all have neutral matchups where I think they're all going to be productive. Geno Smith has looked pretty good in some games this year as well. He had a tough one against San Fran, but San Fran is like the thorn in Seattle side and has been for years. So I expect him to bounce back against Atlanta. I think he'll be fine. Jared Goff as well playing the Vikings. We ranked Amon-Ra St. Brown high, and I think that should reflect in Jared Goff's ranking as well, being ranked as our like QB 15 this week. He's been playing very, very well. And then we got a little C tier here that I'll touch on. Daniel Jones, it's got some rushing upside. Malik Neighbors back as well, playing against the Philadelphia Eagles secondary, who's been right smack middle in the pack from a production perspective for wide receiver or for quarterbacks. So Daniel Jones might have a decent week. Anthony Richardson playing the Miami Dolphins. We're just ranking him in this tier purely because he has rushing upside. I'm not really counting on anything in the passing game. he looks absolutely awful and he needs to get better, or we'll keep ranking him lower. Aaron Rodgers got a little bump up here because his buddy's back. He's got the band back together, it feels like, with Davante Adams. He's throwing the ball to. Yeah, they're playing Pittsburgh. Yeah, that's a tough matchup. Yeah, they haven't allowed a lot of quarterback production, but I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be just fine now that he's got 2 elite level wide receivers from a talent perspective. And again, I already touched on this, but the Pittsburgh Steelers run defense is a lot better than their pass defense. So keep that in mind.
Last year here is going to be Lawrence, May, Herbert, Stafford, Dalton, O'Connell, and Nix. Again, these are guys you're only starting in Superflex leagues, or if you're streaming quarterback, if you have bad injury, you're in a deeper league, something like that. So there's a full list of quarterbacks. And there you go. Those are our ultimate rankings for the week. Do us a huge favor. Drop a like. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you check out our content breaking down some of the big news that happened in fantasy football this week. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you later.